Hello everybody and welcome to Scalable Scripts. In this video, you will learn how to create authentication using Angular and Laravel. Let's start by installing Nodejs. The installation is pretty simple. Just go to nodejs.org and download the installer. Next, open the installer. For the installation now, just click Continue and Node.js will be installed in the end. As last step, I will remove the installer to the trash. Next, go to angular.io/guide/quickstart and you will find the command to install Angular. Let's copy it and paste it to our terminal. Let's wait until it's done. And now that Angular is installed, let's create our first project. To create a new project, we use ng-new. Then we need the name of the project. You can name it based on your project. It will ask us if we want to add Angular routing. I will answer yes. Then I will use SAS style sheet format. Let's wait until it's done. Now let's open the project with an IDE. I will use PHP Storm, and this is an Angular project, a default one. In the app folder we have the main files, so we have here the Angular routing and the app component.ts. Now let's run this project and see how it looks like. Open the terminal and write ng-serve. This will serve our program to the browser and run it on the port 4200. When it's finished, open the browser and type localhost 4200. This is our running Angular app. Now let's see how our files are connected to each other. They are located to the source app directory. AppComponent.ts is a class that bands together the HTML and CSS files. It's also used to handle the logic of the components itself. Each component has a selector. In this case is app-root. This selector is used in the main index.html file. Here is the entry point of our app. Each selector should have a prefix. In our case, the prefix is up. If you want to change the prefix, you should go to angular.json and change the prefix here. Next is the template URL. This points to the HTML file this component is using. As we can see, this is the HTML our previous ng-serve was using. Next is the styles URL. This points to the SCSS file this component is using. In our case, it is blank. app.component.spec.ts is a file that is used to test our components. This tutorial won't cover the testing, but I will include them in my next series. In this case, I will remove this file. app.module.ts organizes all our imports files in a structured way. We'll see more about modules as we progress. App routing module is a place where we will store all the routes of the app. We don't have any routes yet. Let's start by creating one. Let's open the terminal and write ng-gc-public. This is short for ng generate component public. It will generate all the component files in the public folder with a simple message public works. As we explained, we won't be using testing in this project, so I will delete this file also. To make sure spec files are not generated by Angular CLI, we should change the semantics in angular.json. Here I will add a new line for the spec file to be false. I will copy this code and do the same thing for each model and service. Now each component we generate with Angular CLI won't have the spec file. And now let's add the public component to our routes. Each route should have a path, I will call it public, and the component is a public component that we create. Before we ng-serve, we go to app.component.html and remove all the HTML except router auth. Router outlet is the place where all the routes will appear. Let's see how it works now. Let's open the terminal and write ng-serve. Let's wait until it's finished. Let's open the browser and write localhost 4200/public. As we can see, the public route works. And it displays the public message written in the public component.html. Now let's create a new component and we will call it secure. Secure component will be responsible for all the routes that need user authentication. Public component and secure component are both imported by appmodule.ts. Each time we generate components from Angular CLI, they will be automatically imported in the nearest module. Now let's add secure component to our routes. It will work just like public component. Let's create a child component for the public component. Open the terminal and write ng generate component public/home. So the component will be home component inside the public folder. Now we should add this component to our route. We will add a new parameter called children that accepts an array of routes. So all the routes inside the public component will inherit its functionalities. Let's see how it works now. As we can see, something is wrong. We should see here home works instead of public works. The reason is that we didn't add the router outlet in the public component. Let's add it now. And now it shows the correct message. Now let's create a new component. Type ng generate component public/login. Here we will add all the login HTML and logic. Now let's add it to the routes. The path will be login and the component login component. Let's go to the login route and it works correctly. There is a refactoring that I will do now. All the components that we create will be added in the app module. Right now they are only 5, so that's not a problem, but the more components we will add later, the messier the app module will become. To solve this, I will create another module, but I need to delete home and login component. Don't worry, I will create them again easily. Let's open the terminal and write ng-gm-public, which stands for ng-generate module public. The public module is pretty basic. Before we edit the app module, we forgot to delete public component. Let's do it and add it to public module. Now inside the imports array, we add the public module. Let's generate again home component. Type ng-gc public/home. And we can see that home component is imported in the public module, not in the app module. And this way our code will be much more cleaner. Let's generate now the login component. Login component is also imported in the public model. Let's see it in the browser now. We are expecting login works, but we got a blank page. Something must be wrong. Let's inspect to find the problem. As we can see, we got one error. Let's click to see more about it. Router outlet is not a known element. This happens because we didn't import the router module. Let's check the browser again, and it still doesn't work. This error means we need to import a router module on the public module too. Now it works as it should. Let's add some styles to our project. I will use Bootstrap for this project, so I will be installing it using npm. Open the terminal and type npm i bootstrap, which stands short for npm install bootstrap. After the installation is completed, we need to add the bootstrap sass inside angular.json. Here we add a new line, type node modules /bootstrap /scss /bootstrap.scss. Then we need to ng-serve again for the changes to be shown. Now, if we open the browser, we can see that Homeworks is shown as a different font style. This means that Bootstrap is working correctly. Now let's go to public.component.html and add a navbar there. Let's close the other tabs to be more focused. Let's add this HTML. This is a simple HTML for a simple Bootstrap navbar, which has only a home and a login link. This is what it looks like. I will add a div with a class container for the router outlet, so the text is displayed in the center. Homeworks looks better now, and also login works. Let's point this link to our login and see how it works. As we can see, it doesn't work correctly. The page shouldn't refresh, and to solve this we shouldn't be using href, but a router link. Now, as you can see, the link works correctly. Let's add some styles for home-component.html now. This is a div with a class Jumbotron, with a welcome message and a link to our login page. Now let's go to login-component.html and add this form. It will look like this, but I don't like it very wide. I will shrink it a little bit. I will add a style for this form class in the login-component.scss. I will add width of 300 pixels and margin 0 auto. And login looks fine now. Before installing Laravel, we need to install Composer. Composer is a package manager just like npm, but for PHP modules. Go to getcomposer.erg/download and you will see the download instructions. Let's copy each line and paste it to the terminal. The first line will download the Composer installer as a PHP file. The second line will verify the installer. This line will execute the installer, and now we need to unlink it. We are not finished yet. We need to move composer.var to user local bin, so we can use Composer globally on our computer. Now, when we type Composer, we will see a list of commands that Composer will use, which means that our installation was successful. Now we need to install Laravel. Go to laravel.com/docs/the version you want to install. In this tutorial, I have installed 5.7, but you can install the last one, version 8 or 7. And here you will see the installation instructions. Copy this line here and paste it to our terminal. I will change the name based on my project name. Let's type enter and wait for the installation to finish. After the installation is done, we open the project with PHP Storm. This is Laravel default folder structure. In the app folder, we will store our controllers and models, and in the public folder, we will store our public assets. To run the app, we need to open the terminal and write php artisan serve. Copy this URL and paste it to our browser. And this is our running Laravel app. Let's work on the API now. But first I will add the Laravel project inside this workspace. Let's go to File, Open, and let's select the folder we want to add. Open to current window, and we must check Add to currently opened projects. Now we have both of our projects to one PHP Storm project. Now let's add a simple route. Let's go to Routes, API.php. This route returns the current logged in user, but we will remove it for now. Type route, column, get the route we want to go, and an empty function. For now, let's return a string. I will call it hello world. Let's see our changes. Let's go to our API project and write php artisan serve. Let's open our browser and type localhost 8000, where we can see Laravel welcome page, but our text is shown on /API. I don't want all the APIs to have the /API route, so I will go to Route Service Provider and modify that. The file is located in app providers route service provider. Two functions are being called here: map API routes and map web routes. Map web routes utilizes web.php, and map API routes utilizes api.php. I will delete prefix API here and comment the map web routes. Let's see it in the browser now, and it works as expected. Let's go to api.php again now, and let's create a controller to show the message. The command is php artisan make controller, and I will call it user controller. Let's go to the controller now. The controller is located in the app http controllers user controller. Let's create a function now, and I will call it index. And let's return just hello world. And now in api.php, I will replace the function with user controller at index. And as you can see, the page works as previously. Now let's show some data from the database. Let's go to Database Migrations directory. By default, the user migration schema is created for us. I will remove the name column and add the first name and last name columns. I will also remove email verified at. Now we need to add our DB credentials to our env file. And now let's open the terminal and write php artisan migrate. As you can see, our migration was successful, and our tables are created in our database. Let's connect to MySQL to see our tables. I will insert my database name and my username and password credentials, and I will type connect. As we can see, the users table was created, but it is empty. Let's fill it with some data. I will open the terminal and write php artisan make seeder users table seeder. Seeders are used to fill a database with fake data. Let's go to database seeds users table seeder. Let's create a factory. The first parameter is a user class. The second one is a number of users we want to create. Now let's go to user factory and replace name with first name and last name. And remove email verified at. The password for each user will be secret by default. Now open the terminal and type php artisan dbseed -- class equals user table seeder. Let's go to our database now, and you can see that the users table is filled with some fake user data. Now let's go to user controller and replace hello world with user column all. Let's go to our browser now, and you can see that all the users are returned as an API. Now, as next step, we'll try to log in with our users. Laravel has already a package to handle authentication, and it is called Laravel Passport. Let's install it and see how it works. Open the terminal and write composer require Laravel/passport. Let's wait till it's done. And after it is completed, we need to create the passport tables. And for this, we type in the terminal php artisan migrate. As you can see, there are quite some migrations that are created. Let's go to our database and refresh. You can see that 5 new tables have been created that Laravel Passport will use. Now we need to run php artisan passport install. This command will create 2 client IDs. Let's copy them and write them to our env file. Client_1, and let's copy client secret, and we will do the same thing for client_2. Now let's go to our user table and use another trait as API tokens. Let's replace the name here into first name and last name. Now we need to add passport routes. Let's go to auth passport provider. Before adding them, let's go to the terminal and write php artisan route list. As we can see, we have only one route. In the boot function, let's write passport colon routes. Now let's run again php artisan route list, and we will see a bunch of routes. Let's make it bigger to see more. Auth/token is the call that we will use right now to log in our users. But we will have one more thing to do. Let's go to config auth.php. In the guard section, we have to change the API driver to passport instead of token. Now we are ready to log in. Let's restart the server, type php artisan serve, and let's open Postman to test our login. Let's write localhost 8000/auth/token. Change the method from get to post. Now let's click body and add the request parameters. The first one is username, which is, in our case, the email of the user. Let's go to our database and get one of them. The second parameter is password, which in our case is secret. Grant type will be password. Client ID, which is 2. Client secret, we already saved it in our env file. Let's go there and copy it. The last one is scope. I will put an asterisk here for all the scopes. Let's click send now, and as you can see, we are successfully logged in. This is our access token, which will be used in our frontend to verify that the current user is logged in. Now we need to send the same request from Angular. To do that, we need a form. Let's see how to do it. First, let's go to public module and import reactive forms module. Now let's go to login component.ts and create a variable form of type form group. Now inside the constructor, write private fb form builder. Now inside ng on init, let's initialize the variable form. The form builder will need our inputs, email and password. Now let's go to form HTML, and here we need to add our form group with square brackets. Inside each input, we need to add form control name. In our case, they are email and password. Now let's add a submit listener that we'll call the submit function. Let's create the submit function, and here we will console log our form values with a getRowValue function. Let's go to our browser now and inspect the page. Go to Console tab and let's adjust a little bit the height. Let's write AA and type login. It console logs what I typed. Now we need to send a post request to our server. To do that, we need to inject the HTTP client. We need also to import the HTTP client module in public modules. Now, inside the submit function, let's write this HTTP post, and the first parameter is the URL we want to post. In our case, is http localhost 8000/out/token. The second parameter is the data we want to send. Let's delete the console log and create a variable form data which is equal this.form.getRowValue. Now let's create a variable called data with the same fields as the one in Postman. The first parameter was username, which is equal to formdata.email. The same thing happens for password. Grant type is password and client ID is 2. Client secret is the one from our env file and scope is an asterisk. We are not finished yet for the HTTP post, because we need to subscribe for the response. Subscribe has two fallbacks. The first one happens when the request is successful, and the second one when the request fails. Let's console log successful when the request is successful and error when the request fails. Also, we will console log the request itself. Let's open the browser and write AA and type login. This is not an error we were expecting. Let's fix that in the next module. To solve the cross-origin problem, or short course, we need to install a package that will allow all requests from all the origins. This is the URL of Laravel course package. Let's install it and see how to use it. Copy this code and paste it to our terminal. This code will download the package and add it to our vendor folder. After the installation is done, we need to add the handle course middleware. Go to app http-kernel.php and paste it to the middleware array. We still have one more thing to do. We need to add a course configuration file. Copy this code and paste it to our terminal. This will create a course.php file so we can configure it. Let's go to config course.php. By default, the allowed origin is set to all, so that is what we need. Let's open the browser now and try to log in again. Let's type AA and click login. As we can see, we do not have the course problem anymore. Instead, we got a valid message that all credentials were incorrect. Let's log in now with a valid email and password. And we can see now that our login was successful and the server returned a token. As we are logged in, we want to get our current user data. Let's create a route for that purpose. I will create a /user route that points to user controller and user method. We need to access this route only when we are logged in. To do that, we need to add a middleware auth column API. This is Laravel Passport default middleware for authenticated users. Now let's go to user controller and add the user method. Type public function user. We need also to add the request parameter. And to return our current logged in user, we need to return request raw user. Let's open Postman to test our method. I will open a new tab and write localhost 8000/user. We got an error which says that route login is not defined. This happens because we are currently not authenticated, and Laravel will try to redirect us to the login route, which we currently don't have. We will fix that, but first I will go to exceptions handler.php. I want to return a JSON instead of a big HTML every time an exception happens. To do that, we need to command the return parent render function and instead return a response. The first parameter will be an array with key error and value exception, get message. The second parameter is the code of the error, which we get with the exception get code. Sometimes the code is not returned, and the response itself will throw an exception. So in this case, we will return default 400 code, in case if it's not set. Let's open Postman now, and you will see that the error now is returned as a JSON. But still, our problem is not solved. So let's fix the error now. Let's go to app http-kernel.php. The problem is in this authenticate.php file, which is located in the middleware folder. Here we can see that if the request does not accept JSON, it will redirect to the login route. We will delete this file now and replace the middleware with Illuminate Auth middleware Authenticate class. Let's see the error message now, and now we are getting a pretty understandable message, which tells us that we are not authenticated. To get authenticated, we need to add the access token in the headers. Let's copy the access token now. Click the Headers tab and add an authorization header with a value bearer and paste the access token. Click the Send button now, and you can see the current logged in user's data. Now let's get the current user data from Angular. If we inspect and try to log in, we will get an access token. Let's use that access token. Let's go to login component.html, where currently we are just console logging the result. Now we will store the access token and will redirect to the secure component. To redirect to the secure component, we need to import the router service into the constructor. Remove the console logs and write this.router.navigate, and the parameter will be an array that has the secure route in it. Before we are redirected, we need to store this access token. We'll use local storage for it. Type local storage set item, and the first parameter is the key, which is token, and the second parameter is our access token. The editor will give warning for the access token because it doesn't know what type the result is. To fix that, we'll set the result to any. Let's try it on our browser, and let's add our credentials. And at the end, type login. So the redirection works, but the HTML doesn't look right. Let's fix that. Let's copy the HTML from public component.html and replace it with a router outlet. Then paste the HTML to app component.html. And now, as we can see, it looks much better. Now let's go to securecomponent.ts and try to get the current user. Inside the constructor, write private http :http client. Now, inside ng-on-it, let's send a GET request to localhost 8000/user using the HTTP client variable. We'll subscribe and console log the result. Now let's go to the web browser and inspect to see the request. We are getting some errors because we are currently not authenticated. We are getting this message because we are currently not sending the token through the headers. Let's do that now. Let's create a variable called headers equals new HTTP headers. Inside HTTP headers, write authorization : and backticks. These special characters are used when we want to use string concatenation. Now let's write bearer, $, open and close curly brackets, and now inside the brackets we can use any Angular variables. I will use local storage getItemToken. Now inside the GET request, let's add a new parameter, which will be the headers. Now let's go to the browser and we can see that we are getting the current user. Let's display it in the HTML file. Let's create a new variable called user. Let's go to securecomponent.html and remove secureworks and type hi double curly and user.firstname. This is the way Angular used to display variables. Let's also show the last name. Let's go to our GET request and replace the console log with this user equals to result. And in the browser, we are seeing the correct first name and last name from the current user. But in the console, we have an error. Cannot read property first name of undefined. This happens because the user variable is undefined. At first and then after the call has ended, we display the first name. To prevent that, let's write inside the p tag ng if user. So we'll show the first name and last name when the API call has ended. We don't have that error now, and now let's replace the login button in the navbar. Let's go to app-component.ts and remove the title variable. Let's implement the onInit interface so we can use the ng onInit function. And let's create a variable now called loggedin equals to false. Inside ng onInit, write this.loggedin equals to local storage get item token is not equal to null. This means that we are logged in as long as the token inside the local storage is not equal to null. Now let's go to appcomponent.html and go to the login button. Write ng if not logged in, and now let's add the logout button with the opposite condition. Now every time we click the logout button, we should call the logout method. Let's create that method now. It will be a simple one, and we will just remove the token from the local storage. Let's open the browser, and we can see that we are currently logged in and we can see the logout button. If we click it, we'll go back to our home page. And if we go back to the secure component, we'll see that we are not showing the name and we are unauthenticated. We have one more thing to do. Let's go to securecomponent.ts and let's handle the unauthenticated case. Every time we get an error from the unauthenticated user, we'll remove the token from the local storage. And we'll import the router module also so we can redirect the user to login page. Now, if we go to the secure page, we'll get redirected to the login page. Now let's create the registration form. First, let's generate the component. Type in the terminal ng-gc public/register. The files are generated inside the public folder. I will copy login component.html code and paste it to the register component.html. Now copy the email input and paste it 2 times. This will be the inputs for the first name and last name. I will change the type to text, form control name to first_name, and placeholder to first name. The same thing goes for last name too. The type will be text, form control name to last_name, and placeholder to last name. Now let's copy and paste the password input. Change the form control name to password_confirmation and the placeholder to password confirmation. Now let's create the form on register component.ts. Add the form variable as a form group. Inside the constructor, write private fb form builder. Inside the ng onIt, let's initialize our form group. Type first_name colon empty string. And now I will add some validators to make the first name required. Replace the empty string with an array that has the first parameter as an empty string, and the second one, validators.required. I will do the same thing for the last name and email, but for email I will add an additional validator as an email. Next, I will add validators for password and password confirmation. Both have to be required. Now let's add our register component to our routes. Open the curly brackets and write path register and component register component. Let's open the browser now and write localhost 4200/register. This is how our form currently looks like. Let's make some HTML changes. First, let's change the heading to please register. Now I will wrap first name and last name with a raw Bootstrap class. I will also add col-6 inside the form group class. For the email, I will add col-12. Basically, Bootstrap grid system is divided by 12 columns. You can read more how they work on the Bootstrap documentation. Let's see the changes now. It definitely looks better. We only forgot to change the name of the login button. Let's go to the button and change the name to register. Now the HTML is finished. Now let's make the backend work. First, we will add a new route. This route will be a post request with /register route pointing to user controller at register method. Let's go to user controller now and add the method. The method will be called register and has a request parameter. Let's create the user now. Type user create request all. This can work, but we want to hash the password, not store it as it is. So let's delete it and add every field manually. For the password, we need to hash it with Laravel default hash function. In the end, we will create a message that the user was created successfully. Now, before we are done, we need to add some validations. To do that, we need to make the validation in the request itself. So we will create a request name user register request. Let's go to the file now. First, we need to authorize the request. Then we need to write the request rules. First and last name should be both required. Email should be required and should be a valid email. And password should be required. Should be the same as confirmation password and should have a minimum of 6 characters. Let's replace the request now with user register request. Now let's send the request from Angular. Let's create a submit function and a variable called form data, which has all the data from our form. Now let's import the HTTP client to make HTTP requests. Now we'll send a HTTP request to localhost 8000/register and our data will be the form data. Then we need to subscribe for the result. For now, we'll console log both, the result and the error. Now let's try it on the browser. Let's insert all the data required for creating a user and type register in the end. I will type a 4-digit password to just trigger the validation in the backend. Let's click register and we can see that we have an error. This message is not clear, so we need to modify the backend to return a proper message. Also, the front-end validations are not working. If I remove the email now, it basically won't do anything. To solve this, I will add a simple trick to disable the button if the form is invalid. Disabled with square brackets equals to !form.valid. As we can see, now the button is disabled and it will be functional when all the data are correct. Now let's return a validation message in the backend. Let's go to handler.php and make an if condition. If the exception is an instance of validation exception, then return response with the status 400 and the errors exception a row errors. Let's try to register now, but we will enter a password with 2 characters instead of 6. This will trigger an error. So as you can see, the error is the password should be at least 6 characters. So we got the correct error message. If we type different password, the error will be the password confirmation did not match. If we enter the correct data, then it will return user was created successfully. Let's open the database to see if this user has been inserted. And the data has been inserted. So it means that our registration form works correctly. Now let's try to log in with our newly created user. and you will see that everything works as it should.